Just another loud whore. That's what a senior advisor to Donald J. Trump whispered, right before Jasmine Crockett walked into the chamber with a flash drive that would silence the room in 63 seconds. What they didn't expect was a 99.97% DNA match to a missing 13-year-old girl tied to Epstein. What they couldn't stop was a $4 million payment labeled custody transfer. And what no one was prepared for was the moment Jasmine Crockett stood up in Congress and said, "The father is sitting right behind me." She didn't shout. She didn't need to. The words struck harder, whispered. They didn't just freeze the room. They snapped the spine of the lie that had lived untouched for 2 decades. Reporters dropped their pens. Trump's jaw locked. America forgot to breathe. But what led her there didn't begin with the hearing. It began at 6:12 a.m. with the beep of a secure line and the sound of her mother's breathing in the hospital bed beside her. Jasmine had fallen asleep in a stiff plastic chair with one hand resting on her mother's IV. The room was dim, the monitor pulsing softly, and for a fleeting moment, the outside world felt far away, until her phone vibrated once, then again, then didn't stop. She blinked. Unknown number. No caller ID. Encrypted trace. She almost silenced it, but something in her gut twisted, the way it only did when life was about to split open. She answered. The voice on the other end was calm. Too calm. Male, clipped, accentless. The kind of voice trained to deliver bad news without blinking. "Congresswoman Crockett, we found the girl." There was a pause, long enough to feel like the floor shifted. "She's real, and he knows we have her." The call ended before she could respond. Her hands were shaking. She looked at her mother, still asleep, pale and steady. Jasmine stood. No coffee, no time. She slipped on her navy blue suit like armor, twisted her curls into a tight bun, applied a neutral lip with muscle memory. Jasmine had been in courtrooms, protests, and committee fires before, but this was different. This time, someone had planned something without her, and it felt like it had teeth. Her calendar was blank. No hearings scheduled, no briefings. Her staff had been told she was off-grid for the week to tend to her mother's treatment. That's what made the next call even stranger. It came 14 minutes later from the Oversight Subcommittee's backline. Her aide Marcus relayed the message. "We need you in D.C. by 10. Room 214. Closed session, no press. Digital surveillance reform. Bipartisan, sensitive topic." She didn't ask questions. She knew better. Too much quiet meant something was screaming behind the walls. By 7:10 a.m., a black Suburban was waiting at the hospital curb. The driver didn't introduce himself. He didn't look at her. She barely noticed. Her mind was still replaying that voice on the phone. "She's real." 3 words that erased every conspiracy, every denial, every gaslighting whisper that the girl had been imagined. Washington passed by in gray strokes. Raindrops tapped against the window like Morse code. Jasmine didn't check her messages. Her phone had already been pinged by a dozen reporters sniffing around her vote the week before. None of that mattered now. What mattered came just before they pulled into the Capitol back lot. The driver killed the engine. She stepped out, heels crunching on wet concrete, and there it was, barely visible, but gleaming like a razor under the morning fog. A small, folded piece of cardstock protruded from her jacket's inner pocket, one she hadn't placed there. She froze. It hadn't been there when she left the hospital. She reached in carefully, fingers trembling. It wasn't a note. It was a business card. Heavy stock, embossed in black. No name, no title, no agency. Oh, just 4 words, capitalized and carved like a brand. "The custodian is watching." Her pulse spiked. She scanned the lot. No movement, no cameras. She slipped the card back into her jacket. Her mouth was dry. Her body knew what her mind hadn't caught up to yet. She had just been marked. Who was the custodian? The name echoed like a threat disguised as a title. Jasmine had heard whispers about something by that name before, always in half jokes from junior staffers or coded references buried in redacted memos. "The custodian handles what never happened," someone once said behind closed doors. She'd laughed it off. Now her ribs tightened. She walked the back corridor toward room 214. Her heels clicked like a metronome. She didn't speak to anyone. and no one spoke to her. The hallway was lined with silence, the kind of silence that only exists in places where too many secrets live. As she neared the door, her phone buzzed once more. This time a text. No name, no number, just a photo. It was grainy. Night vision, a hospital room, her mother asleep in the bed. The caption below, "One more step and she never wakes up." Jasmine stopped breathing. Her fingers went numb. Not from fear, but from rage so sharp it went cold. She knew now. This wasn't about policy. It wasn't even about politics. This was about control, about making her choose silence over survival, about making her small. But they'd made a mistake. They thought Jasmine Crockett feared power. What they didn't realize was that she had nothing left to lose. She slipped her phone into her coat pocket without responding, pressed her palm against the door of room 214, and stepped inside. And the minute she did, everything, history, legacy, truth, began to unravel. The room smelled like leather chairs and government lies. Jasmine Crockett nodded politely at the committee assistant, who handed her a folder of procedural notes. Digital surveillance reform, national security chatter, nothing that mattered anymore. Her mind was still in the parking lot, still replaying the cold message about her mother and the faceless name, the custodian. She sat in the corner seat, barely listening to the droning voices of the pre-hearing brief. Words passed by like fog, statutes, amendments, reform metrics. But her fingers trembled slightly inside her coat pocket, brushing against the edge of something sharp, metallic, and cold. The flash drive. She hadn't seen it at first. It was taped beneath her windshield wiper, hidden under a slick of morning rain. It caught the light only because she glanced back instinctively. An old courtroom habit, a sliver of silver in the corner of her eye. No label, no envelope, just a folded scrap of soaked paper taped next to it. 4 words, again in all caps, written in thick black ink. Play this alone. She had pocketed it without a word, her heart suddenly hammering against the inside of her ribs. It felt too deliberate, too precise. Whoever left it there had known exactly where she'd park and exactly when she'd find it. That meant surveillance. That meant intent. Now, inside the secure wing of the Capitol, the weight of it seemed to grow heavier with each passing second. At 10:52 a.m., Jasmine politely excused herself from the panel prep, said she needed a moment to review background materials. No one questioned her. They never did when she used that tone. Measured, composed, like the storm was still far off. But the storm was here, and it was about to make landfall. She walked past 2 aides, nodded at a Capitol police officer, and entered a soundproof side office, used mostly for witness prep. The moment the door clicked shut, she locked it from the inside, drew the blinds, and dimmed the lights. The room exhaled into silence. She slipped the drive into a secured laptop the oversight team kept in that office. Air-gapped, encrypted, offline. Even if it was malware, it wouldn't spread. But Jasmine knew instinctively that what was inside wasn't a virus. It was something worse. The screen blinked. No password. No security gate. Just a single folder. Confidential, rear. Her hands hovered over the trackpad for a second, heart stuttering. Then she clicked. The folder opened. One file. DNA Report 791 PDF. She double-clicked. The screen flickered once, then again, then settled. It was 2 pages. Clean. Clinical. White background. Black text. Cold typography, the kind used in medical labs and international bioclassification centers. It looked like any other genetic summary until her eyes locked onto the center panel. The sample ID, Child 792, and beneath it, bolded, paternal match, 97%. DJT. The breath left her lungs so fast she nearly choked. DJT. The initials sat there like a brand across the chest of the nation. There was no room for misinterpretation, no margin of error, no percentage to hide behind. The results were damning. Her eyes kept scanning. Sample date, March 12th, 2000. Sample origin, Reykjavik Genomics Institute, Iceland. Custodian, redacted. Subject, female, age, 13. Status, missing. Her fingers tightened on the mouse. The room suddenly felt too small. She blinked, trying to slow her breathing, and then she saw the final line, buried in the technical section, like a whisper inside the scream. Variant gene classification, alpha-grade cellular regeneration signature, classified. She froze. This wasn't just a DNA match. It wasn't just a scandal. This was experimentation. She reached forward and zoomed in on the metadata. There, barely visible in the bottom left corner, was a watermark, faint, foreign, but unmistakable. Epstein Global Trust. Her mouth went dry. She leaned back in the chair as if the air had been knocked from her chest. This wasn't some Reddit rabbit hole. This wasn't a fringe theory. This was a lab report, verified, formatted, consistent with federal biotracking templates, and someone wanted her to have it. She stared at the screen, willing it to be fake, but it wouldn't budge. And then, as if programmed on a timer, the screen faded to black. Auto close sequence. She hadn't touched a key. Jasmine sat there, paralyzed, eyes wide and unblinking. The only sound in the room was her own breath. Short, uneven, almost angry. Then her phone buzzed again. A text. No name, no preview. She opened it. A single sentence. He paid to delete her. You can still recover what's left. Below it, a location pin, somewhere in New Jersey, and a timestamp. Tonight, 11:30 p.m. She stared at it, not in disbelief, but in recognition. This was no longer just about speaking truth to power. This was about whether that power had erased a child's existence, and whether she would be the one to bring that truth back to life. She looked back at the USB drive, still warm in her palm, and whispered under her breath, "What did you do, Mr. Trump?" The shadows didn't answer, but they no longer felt silent, because Jasmine Crockett had just crossed the threshold, and the lies weren't sleeping anymore. By the time she exited the Capitol office, her pulse had steadied, but her thoughts had turned razor sharp. She wasn't just carrying evidence now. She was carrying a question too dangerous to ask aloud. Why would the genome of a missing 13-year-old girl contain a classified regenerative marker and match the former president of the United States? She needed help, not from staffers, not from allies inside the House. This required someone who had already bled for the truth. So she made the call. His name was Theo Arkin, an award-winning investigative journalist turned digital ghost after publishing a string of articles tying private biotech contractors to Pentagon shell firms. He'd vanished from mainstream media in 2021, allegedly for health reasons. But Jasmine had stayed in touch. She didn't believe in coincidences, and neither did he. Theo picked up on the second ring. "Jesus, I thought you were done poking nests." "I found the girl," Jasmine said. Silence. "The one from 2000? Her DNA matched to DJT, 99.97%. Another silence. Longer. "Send me the file, and buckle in. You're not ready for what this ties to." 2 hours later, Theo responded. Not with panic, not with shock, but with a link. RGI.org Archive 203 XRML Reykjavik Genomics Institute. At first glance, the site looked dead. A static homepage from the early 2000s. No updated logs, no press. But when Jasmine followed Theo's instructions, using an old browser, a VPN spoofing Iceland, and a password from a leaked DARPA index, she accessed a buried subdirectory marked Project Stormglass. Restricted. What she found wasn't just disturbing. It rewrote the meaning of missing. There were files, cleanly structured, labeled, time-stamped, clinical photographs of teenage girls, eyes blurred, names replaced with strings of letters and numbers, ages 11, 12, 13, subjects flagged M class and R class, M minor, Isha regenerative. Some carried markers Jasmine had never seen. Others had annotations, neurological pliability above threshold, reproductive prime with suppression potential, cellular reversal window, 36 months. One girl had a code stamped across her collarbone in faded ink, TE 45 p.m. Jasmine's heart clenched. That code had appeared in the DNA report. She checked the file again. TE, Trump, Epstein, 45, POTUS number, PM, private minor. They weren't initials. They were inventory tags. She scrolled further and found something she wasn't meant to see. A memo. Internal use only. DARPA Cerberus Forsythia. Project Stormglass. Phase 3. Suspension recommendation. Lead scientist. Redacted summary. While regenerative traits are promising in select subjects, the psychological instability and cellular unpredictability in adolescent candidates necessitate suspension. Recommend full redirection to creeper vein alternative. Subject 792.3 shows anomalous response, 99.97% paternal imprint, suspected breach of donor protocol. Then one final line. Contact DOJ to classify this subject's file under National Security Directive 51A. She stared at the words. Hands numb, DOJ, DARPA, NSD 51A. That directive, Jasmine knew, was reserved for only one thing: civil collapse scenarios, and someone had invoked it to erase a child. Jasmine called Theo back, her voice flat. You said this project was suspended? He exhaled slowly. Officially. DARPA shut it down in 2002, but the Iceland branch kept operating privately. They moved under something darker, a private trust, funded by offshore holdings. The name they used, what? The Custodian Fund. There it was again, the name that wasn't a name, the watcher behind the door. Theo continued. There's more. Some of the funding flows through a Cayman-based firm tied to, get this, Trump Organization sub-entities, Mar-a-Lago Resorts, Liberty Dynamics, even a ghost company listed under Baronium Holdings. Baronium? Jasmine whispered. Yeah, root name, Baron, as in the kid. She felt sick. The layers weren't just deep. They were designed to be untraceable. Until now. She looked back at one of the subject photos. The girl, maybe 13, maybe younger, wore a hospital gown. She had soft eyes, hollowed cheeks, and a stitched wound just beneath her ribcage. The caption beneath her image read, Subject viability, chakra incompatible. Harvest incomplete, recommend termination. Jasmine felt her throat close. This wasn't a scandal. It was a supply chain, and no one had blown the whistle, because the girls weren't supposed to survive long enough to speak. She stared at the data for what felt like hours, not blinking, not breathing. Then finally she copied every file, every image, every log. She encrypted it, stored it across 3 cloud vaults, and sent Theo the backup key. 1 hour later, her phone buzzed again. This time it was Marcus, her aide. Reppin' CROCKETT, you need to come upstairs. Why? There's someone here to see you. Who? There was a pause. Then Marcus said carefully, she says she used to work at the Reykjavik lab. She says she's dead. Jasmine's voice dropped to a whisper. What's her name? Marcus hesitated. She wouldn't say, but she wrote something on a piece of paper. Just 2 words. Jasmine swallowed. Read it. Marcus did. Subject 7912. The walls around Jasmine seemed to close in. The past was no longer buried. It was knocking on her door, alive, and ready to speak. She didn't move at first, just stood there in the quiet after Marcus's voice cracked through the phone. She says she's dead. That sentence didn't just rattle her. It carved something open inside her chest, something older than fear. A woman claiming to be Subject 7912 had just walked into her building and handed over the name she was never supposed to know. That wasn't a message. That was a resurrection. Jasmine reached her office in less than 2 minutes. The hallway leading to her private briefing room was empty, too quiet. Marcus waited outside, pale, stiff, like he'd seen something crawl out of a grave. She's in there, he said. No ID, no phone. She just said you'd understand. Jasmine didn't knock. She opened the door and stepped in. And for the second time that day, the ground beneath her reality shifted. The woman sitting across the room was maybe in her 40s, though her face had the ageless exhaustion of someone who'd been forced to live 5 lives under 5 names. Her posture was straight, like she didn't dare bend even under the weight of time. Her hair was jet black, streaked with gray, pulled into a tight braid. Her eyes, when they met Jasmine's, were calm but haunted. Not the kind of haunted from trauma, but from remembering every secret no one ever wanted spoken aloud. You're Elena, Jasmine said. The woman nodded once. But you died. 2010. Fire in Malta. Your dental records were someone else's, Elena said quietly. They were planted. I was gone before the building burned. Why? Because I saw too much, and they knew one day someone like you would come looking. Jasmine sat down slowly, as if gravity had changed. You worked for Epstein? No, Elena replied. I worked beneath Epstein. I was head of digital security for Jeffrey Epstein Global Holdings. He signed the checks, but the man who wrote the directives? Her voice dropped. Was Donald Trump. The room froze around that name. Jasmine didn't flinch. I handled the transfer of encrypted DNA logs, procurement contracts, NDAs, wire routes. But my job wasn't to protect the data, Elena said. My job was to make it disappear. Jasmine leaned in, her voice low. Why come forward now? Elena looked down at her hands as if they no longer belonged to her. Because for 15 years I watched little girls erase like they were errors in a spreadsheet. Because I buried flash drives in walls. Because I faked death certificates for children I saw breathing. And because I heard him say something no human should ever say about another. Trump? Elena nodded. It was in 2006. I was cataloging surveillance exports when he stormed into the lab. He was angry, said the Iceland tests were incomplete, that the girl was too vocal. Epstein tried to calm him down, but Trump leaned over and said, her voice cracked just for a second. He said, you don't get it, Jeff. This isn't politics. This is the foundation of a dynasty. If she talks, we lose everything. Jasmine felt the hairs on her arms stand. He said, dynasty? Yes. And then he ordered a file to be scrubbed. Child 792. That was her tag. Marin, Jasmine whispered. Her real name was Marin. Elena closed her eyes. I know. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Elena reached into her coat and pulled out a small leather pouch. Inside was a plastic-wrapped microdrive, scratched, old and warm from her body heat. She placed it on the table like it was a living thing. This contains raw footage, not just logs, not just memos. Surveillance from the Iceland facility, voice transcripts, transfer orders, even a sonogram file. It's everything they buried, and everything they'll kill to keep buried. Jasmine's voice was barely a whisper. Why didn't you destroy it? Because one day someone would be brave enough to use it. And you're not afraid? I am terrified, Elena admitted, but fear kept me alive. Truth is what's going to kill them. Jasmine stared at the drive. The world was shifting again. No longer rumors, no longer fragments. This was the artery, the core, the unbroken chain. How many others? Jasmine asked. Dozens, maybe more. All tagged, tracked, uploaded into biometric vaults, tested for regenerative compatibility. They weren't victims. They were inventory. Jasmine stood up slowly. She felt taller than she ever had, not because of pride, but because of the weight now pressed on her shoulders, and the fact she refused to let it break her. I'm going to use this, she said. I'm going to make them answer for every breath they tried to erase. Elena nodded. Then I'll stay dead, but I'll make sure you live long enough to finish. They didn't shake hands. There were no goodbyes. Elena disappeared into a different hallway than she came from. No cameras caught her, no badge registered her entry. She was there, and then she wasn't. But the drive stayed, and in Jasmine Crockett's hand, it pulsed with something undeniable. Not revenge, not hope, but evidence. Enough to shake the foundations of a nation. She didn't sleep that night, not after Elena disappeared, not after Jasmine encrypted the microdrive and stored copies across 3 air-gapped vaults. Not after she reviewed one of the audio files, a grainy hallway recording where a girl's voice whispered, "Please tell my mom I'm still real." She stayed in her office long past midnight, curtains drawn, lights low, surrounded by silence too loud to ignore. Her phone buzzed dozens of times. Press inquiries, congressional aides, cryptic voicemails from blocked numbers. She answered none of them. Then at 2:41 a.m., the knock came, 3 soft taps at the door. Jasmine rose cautiously, hand near her desk drawer. But when she opened it, there was no one outside, just a plain manila envelope lying at her feet. No postage, no name, no seal. She bent down and picked it up. It was warm. Inside was a single folded page, aged and yellowed like it had been hidden for decades. She unfolded it slowly, carefully, like peeling a wound open. At the top, in shaky blue ink, were the words, "If anyone reads this, please tell my mom it was never her fault." Jasmine's breath hitched. The handwriting was small, uneven, childlike. The ink bled in places, as if the pen had trembled or the writer had cried while writing. Every word dripped with a kind of exhaustion no 13-year-old should ever feel. He said I was chosen. He said I was special, that I could heal, that I had magic blood. But I just want to go home. I miss my bed. I miss the way Mom hums in the kitchen. I miss sunlight that doesn't come through glass. They gave me a new name. They said my old name was too traceable. But I remember. My name is Marin Elise Connors. Please tell Mom I didn't run away. They took me. Jasmine's eyes blurred. She sat down, pressing the paper flat with trembling fingers. The letter was dated April 3rd, 2001. That was exactly 5 weeks before Marin was declared a voluntary runaway in the official Palm Beach police file. Near the bottom, the writing shifted. Tighter, darker, almost carved into the page. He laughed when I cried. He said my mother signed the papers. She didn't. I know she didn't. Please, if anyone ever finds this, tell her I forgive her. I forgive her. Jasmine didn't cry. Her throat clenched, but no tears came. She wasn't reading a letter. She was standing inside a scream that had been buried alive, and then folded into the final crease of the letter, hidden like a secret inside a secret, was a photocopy, a birth certificate, the name Marin Elise Connors. Date of birth, March 12th, 1987. Mother, Lena Connors. Father, unknown. The word typed in bold, stamped official, but it had been crossed out in pen, and above it, written in red ink, in small, precise letters, DJT. Jasmine recoiled like the paper had burned her. This wasn't circumstantial. This wasn't theory. This was state documentation, tampered by hand. The handwriting was deliberate, formal, like someone used to signing things meant to disappear. She stared at it for what felt like forever. A missing child had written her mother an apology for being taken, and someone had overwritten her bloodline in ink. This wasn't just about DNA anymore. This was about legacy. He knew. Trump hadn't just tried to erase a girl. He had tried to erase his own signature from her life. Jasmine rose and walked to the window. Washington was still dark, its marble towers glowing faintly beneath the streetlights. Somewhere in the distance, thunder cracked. The air felt charged, like the city itself was listening. She pressed the letter against the glass. The words shimmered under the faint yellow light. Tell my mom, I forgive her. It echoed like a drumbeat beneath her ribs. So many people had screamed at Jasmine over the years. Judges, pundits, trolls with microphones and fake badges. But none of them had ever made her feel what this little girl did with 11 handwritten words. The pain wasn't just that Marin had been taken. It was that she'd been forgotten, folded into a cabinet, sealed behind encrypted servers, swapped for silence, but her voice survived. Jasmine turned from the window, snapped a photo of the letter, encrypted the image, and sent it to 2 trusted allies. She placed the original in a fireproof lockbox beneath her floor. Then she picked up her phone. She didn't call the FBI. She didn't call the press. She called her mother. The voice on the other end was tired but warm. Jazz, I got something, Jasmine said. Her voice wavered. It's not about politics. It's about a girl, a real one, and a mother who never stopped missing her. There was a pause, then, softly, so what are you going to do? Jasmine looked at the copy of the birth certificate on her desk. Make sure no one calls her unknown ever again. Outside her window, the Capitol remained still, but Jasmine Crockett was already writing a new line into the heart of the nation's memory, one that couldn't be redacted, one that began not with outrage, but with forgiveness. She sat in silence for a long time, her phone still warm from the call with her mother. That voice, soft but grounded, had steadied Jasmine through everything. Through the courts that laughed her out of the room, through the campaigns where she was too loud, through every hearing where her facts were ignored and her tone policed. And now that same voice was in danger of becoming a memory. At exactly 3:12 a.m., her phone buzzed again. No name, no number, just a video file. The thumbnail was black, 1 second long, no metadata, no origin. She tapped it. The screen opened to grainy, low-light footage, a hospital room, familiar. Jasmine's breath hitched before her brain caught up. It was her mother's room. The camera was angled from the corner ceiling, far above where any visitor would notice. The image was time-stamped, just 24 minutes earlier. Her mother lay asleep beneath pale blue sheets, IV line steady, chest rising and falling slowly. Peaceful, unaware. But it wasn't the shot that chilled Jasmine's bones. It was the movement. In the lower left corner of the screen, a man's silhouette appeared, barely visible, almost spectral. He didn't approach the bed. He didn't touch anything. He just stood there, watching, for 9 full seconds. Then in one slow, deliberate motion, he reached into his coat, pulled out a white envelope, and placed it on the counter next to her mother's water cup. He looked directly into the camera before walking off screen. The footage cut to black. Jasmine stared at the screen, her lungs refusing to expand. Then came the second buzz, a text. One more testimony, and she dies in her sleep. She didn't scream. She didn't throw the phone. She simply froze. Not from fear, but from the weight of choice crashing down onto her chest like a steel door. She replayed the video 3 times, watched every breath her mother took, counted them like prayers. On the 4th playback, she paused at the man's face. It wasn't clear, distorted just enough to evade identification. But there was something in the posture, the way he stood like he belonged in the room. He wasn't a hired thug. He was trained. And whoever sent him had access to secure medical wings, to patient schedules, to protected floors that even congressional clearance didn't reach. This wasn't just intimidation. This was infiltration. Jasmine leaned forward, pressing her hand against her forehead. Her body was shaking, but it wasn't fear. It was fury she had to keep caged. The mother who raised her with nothing but a voice and a spine was now being used as leverage. And she couldn't scream. She couldn't fight. Because the next move had to be silent, precise, deadly accurate. She took a breath and called Marcus. He answered instantly. Marcus, listen carefully. No questions. I'm here. You need to pull all security footage from Ward 3C at Baylor Medical from midnight until now. No external access. Get it internally, quietly. I want faces, names, entry logs, even hallway shadows. Got it. And call Rivera. I want 2 plainclothes posted outside my mother's room before sunrise. Don't let the hospital staff know. Rotate shifts every 4 hours. Anyone not vetted comes near her, you flag me directly. Marcus didn't hesitate. Copy. Jasmine hung up. Then she opened the envelope the man had left. It was sitting in her office mail slot, as if it had arrived by courier hours ago and no one had noticed. Inside was a printed transcript. No logo, no letterhead. Just words. Interrogation, transcript. M. Connors, date redacted, location redacted. Agent, does the child have enhanced tissue response? Subject, she heals fast, yes. Bruises fade in hours. It scared me. Agent, did you ever take blood samples yourself? Subject, no. I'm her mother. I didn't think she'd be like this. Agent, you understand this is above parental rights. We're not discussing a child anymore. We're discussing property. The last word punched Jasmine in the gut. Property. They hadn't just erased Marin. They'd reclassified her from human to asset, from daughter to data point, and they were trying to do the same now. To her mother, make her small, remove her from the conversation, turn her into a tool to be used. Jasmine stood and walked to the mirror in her office. Her reflection stared back. Tired, yes. Rattled, but unbroken. She touched her own face as if confirming that she still existed beyond fear. Then she spoke aloud, softly. You want me silent? Come for me, but touch her, and I will bring your entire machine down in front of every goddamn camera in the world. The Capitol still slept, but war had been declared, and Jasmine Crockett was no longer carrying evidence. She was carrying vengeance. The kind of vengeance that doesn't shout or burn buildings. It simply waits for the world to look it in the eye and then makes it regret what it sees. She stepped into the Oversight Committee chamber at 10:04 a.m. sharp. Room 3A, Rayburn Building. No media, no press credentials allowed. But every major outlet had sent someone. Senators shifted in their seats. Lawyers sat straighter than usual. Even the marble columns along the rear wall seemed more alert. This hearing wasn't live-streamed, but somehow the entire country was watching. Every network was leaking it in real time. Someone had made sure of that. Jasmine didn't ask who. She didn't need to. Ghosts don't need names. They need outcomes. She wore no makeup, no earrings, navy blue blazer, black slacks. Her hair was pinned back into a tight low bun, not for beauty, but for war. In her left hand was a small black hard drive, marked only with a scratched silver symbol, age 17. In her right, notes scribbled on a torn envelope from the night before. 3 bullet points, 1 question, and a quote from Marin's letter, folded beneath her palm like a blade tucked under flesh. As she stepped to the microphone, every camera behind frosted glass snapped on. Every mic light blinked red. The chair cleared her throat. Congresswoman Crockett, you have the floor. Jasmine didn't look at her. Her eyes were locked across the room. On him. Donald J. Trump sat at the far end of the panel, his legal team flanking him like a fortress in $1,000 suits. He wasn't smiling this time. His face was pale, jaw tight, hands clasped together like he was bracing for impact. He knew. Jasmine leaned into the mic. Madam Chair, she said, with permission, I'd like to begin with visual documentation, verified by 3 independent forensic labs and obtained legally under whistleblower statute 18 U.S.C. paragraph 1514A. The chair nodded once. Granted. Jasmine inserted the drive into the panel console. The monitors around the room flickered, then steadied. A room appeared. Low light, luxurious, velvet curtains drawn, leather armchairs, a decanter of scotch on the table. In the center sat Jeffrey Epstein. To his left, half-shadowed, reclined and casual, Donald Trump. A timestamp hovered in the upper right. June 12, 2006. Private network archive, location, redacted. The audio kicked in after a beat. Epstein. The Iceland files came back flagged. She's still viable. Trump. Then you bury her. We had a deal. Epstein. You're overreacting. She's just one girl. Trump leaned forward, voice lowered, but clear. If that girl survives, we don't. The room stopped breathing. A sharp inhale from a clerk. A pen dropped from the hands of a junior senator. A low murmur tried to rise, but Jasmine cut it off with one sentence. This clip was extracted from Project Stormglass Archive, authenticated through both domestic and international cybersecurity agencies, including one previously contracted by the Trump Organization itself. She let that sit like a weight on the table. Trump sat motionless, but his lawyer leaned forward, whispering fast. Jasmine wasn't finished. She clicked to the next video, shorter, 30 seconds, same setting. Different angle, Epstein laughing. Trump, you don't understand. She's not just a girl, she's the blueprint. She bleeds legacy. Epstein, you're scared. Trump, I'm building forever, and I won't let her ruin it. The clip cut to black. No music, no narration, just silence so thick it felt like stone. Jasmine leaned in again. Project Stormglass wasn't theory. It wasn't rumor. It was state-sanctioned biotracking, funded through DARPA in partnership with private investors. One of those investors, under the alias Baronium Holdings, was linked to accounts routed directly through Trump International Holdings. She raised a folder in her hand. These are the bank records. These are the procurement logs. And this, she placed a single page beneath the document cam, is the birth certificate of a girl named Marin Elise Connors, declared a runaway, listed father, unknown. She flipped it, amended in pen to read DJT. Now even the senators looked away. Jasmine's voice was steady, cold. She wasn't a liability. She was a prototype. And when she refused to be erased, they erased everything else. Trump finally spoke. "That's a forgery," he growled. Jasmine didn't flinch. "Then explain the handwriting match to your own notes, authenticated by the same forensic lab that cleared you in your second impeachment." He said nothing. She leaned in, one last time. "The American people don't need my opinion. They need the truth. And this," she gestured to the screen, "is what your dynasty paid to disappear." The chair tapped her gavel once. The echo cracked like thunder. The hearing was over, but America was just beginning to wake up. C-SPAN feeds were crashing. Phones were buzzing in newsrooms across the country. Hashtags surged like wildfire. Millions glued to screens that had been blacked out just hours earlier. The words were already everywhere. "If that girl survives, we don't." And yet, while the public reeled, something far older, deeper, colder stirred beneath the surface. It began with a flicker on the main monitor. Static, then black, then blue. No one touched the controls. No one cued the feed. It hijacked itself. The oversight chamber, still full of committee members packing up, froze mid-motion. The screen now displayed a single image, a rotating seal, not governmental, not military, something older, a serpent devouring its tail inside a ring of Latin. "Silenti custodium veritas." In silence, truth is kept. A voice crackled over the chamber speakers. Male, ageless, untraceable. "Terminate the session immediately. All exhibits fall under emergency classification protocol. This proceeding is in violation of National Security Order BSAA 76. Jasmine turned slowly, facing the screen. The chair blinked. "Who the hell are you?" The voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "I am the custodian." Silence. Thick, heavy. The lights dimmed slightly. Automated systems reacting to something no one understood. The screen shifted. A grainy video feed appeared. Encrypted, face blurred, background masked with distortion. But the posture was unmistakable. Composed, powerful, practiced. The kind of person who'd never been elected, but had made more decisions than 1,000 presidents. The figure leaned in. "Congresswoman Crockett, by invoking and displaying material from Project Stormglass, you have violated Section 4 of the Biosecurity Sovereignty and Anomaly Act. Codename, BSAA 76. This statute supersedes congressional privilege and public interest doctrine." The chair slammed her gavel again. "There is no such act filed in the National Register. That law doesn't exist." The custodian didn't blink. "Exactly." A beat passed. Jasmine stepped forward. "I'd like the record to show," she said evenly, "that an unidentified individual is attempting to override a federal committee through a law that no one has heard of, under authority that doesn't legally exist." The custodian's head tilted, just slightly. "And yet, I'm here." Jasmine narrowed her eyes. "What exactly are you trying to protect?" The voice responded without hesitation. "Continuity." Jasmine frowned. "Of what?" "Of belief, of stability, of the illusion that your government hasn't already sold parts of itself to science it can't control." The room was frozen. Even staffers had stopped moving. The custodian continued. "Project Stormglass was never designed for public visibility. The subjects were never meant to survive. The prototypes were coded, monitored, and disposed according to international ethics protocols authorized under Joint Directive D-1432. Jasmine cut in, sharper now. "International ethics. You branded children." "We protected a future your democracy can't survive," he replied coldly. "Do you think your country can absorb the truth? That its presidents negotiated with black market genome traders? That your biotech lobby bought silence with fetal stem currency and crypto-banked miners?" Jasmine stepped closer to the mic. Her voice was low, but it burned. "I think this country can survive anything except silence." The custodian's voice remained eerily calm. "You have no idea what they'll do to you." "I'm not scared of men in shadows." "Good, because shadows don't make threats." A sudden beep echoed through the chamber. Then a series of red warnings blinked across the side monitors. Secure line breach detected. Audio surveillance override. Containment protocol incomplete. The custodian turned slightly in his feed. And now you've triggered the failsafe. Jasmine's aide, Marcus, burst through the door. Ma'am, we have a problem. External systems are shutting down. Building security just defaulted to lockdown. The custodian raised his voice, just once. You have exactly 4 minutes to shut down this session, delete the footage, and rescind your testimony, or the system will do it for you. Jasmine didn't move. Instead, she reached for the small black flash drive still warm in her coat pocket. The mirror copy of the hard evidence, already encoded and scheduled to upload to 17 independent servers in staggered intervals. She slipped it into a secondary port beneath the panel. Silent, unnoticed. And then she looked up, directly at the custodian. I hope, she said calmly, you're watching very closely. The screen flickered. He said nothing. Then quietly, you've chosen rupture. The feed cut. Every screen went black. For a moment it felt like nothing moved, not even time. Then the power returned. But Jasmine knew in her bones that something else had just been activated, something far more dangerous than secrecy. A machine built not to hide truth, but to erase those who told it. And now it had seen her. She didn't go home that night. Instead, she drove until the sunrise bled into the sky like an open wound, until the roads thinned and the city receded behind her, like a shadow trying to follow. She parked beneath an overpass outside Arlington. Engine off, mind spinning. The custodian had vanished from the feed, but his message remained. Rupture had begun. And then, at 6:47 a.m., her phone buzzed with an email that felt like a bullet, from unlisted 9048protonmail.com. Subject, 6-digit match. She breathes. Body, basement, brick house, iron mailbox, 112 Castlewood Woody Rahway, NJ. She's not just a memory. Attached, a single JPEG. Low resolution, dimly lit, a pair of brown eyes staring into the camera. Red-rimmed, hollow, but alive. Jasmine's pulse kicked up. She zoomed in. In the corner of the photo, barely visible, was a laminated hospital bracelet with a name scribbled in faded ink. M. Connors. She didn't wait. By noon she was in Rahway. No security escort, no camera crew, no aides. Just her and a fire that didn't care about protocol. The house sat at the end of a dead road, abandoned on paper, a foreclosure that never made it to auction. Jasmine parked across the street, scanned for movement. None. The mailbox was iron, just like the email said. She approached slowly, quietly, every step crunching on gravel that hadn't felt footsteps in years. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the house was dead silent. Layers of dust on the floor, plastic still wrapped around furniture that had never been sat on. A single overhead light flickered weakly. Then she saw it. In the far corner of the hallway, partially hidden behind a floor-length mirror, was a door. Narrow, steel-framed, basement access. She opened it. The smell hit first, not rot, not decay, but sterility. Bleach, industrial disinfectant. The air was too clean for a place that had seen pain. The stairs creaked as she descended. She didn't breathe. At the bottom, behind a rusted cage gate, sat a woman, pale, thin, wrapped in a hospital gown too large for her frame. Her hair was long, matted, streaked with silver despite her youth. Her wrist bore faded bruises in perfect symmetry, like she'd been restrained for years. But her eyes, those eyes, they were Marines, and she spoke before Jasmine could. "You're late," she said softly, voice hoarse, but steady. Jasmine moved closer. "You know who I am? They said you'd come. One day. A woman who couldn't forget." Tears threatened to break, but Jasmine swallowed them. "You're real." Marin nodded. "They kept me because I healed too fast. They said I was wrong, that I was supposed to disappear. But I remembered. Mom's hands, her smell, her song." Jasmine reached through the bars, but Marin didn't flinch. Instead, she reached into her waistband and pulled out a small recording device. Old, scuffed, protected like treasure. "I want them to hear what they did." Jasmine nodded. "They will." They left together, through a back door that led straight into woods. Marin didn't look back. 3 days later, inside a closed session of Congress, Jasmine stood before the same panel that once doubted her. She didn't speak first. She pressed play. The recording opened with static, then a soft click, then her voice, weak, childlike, terrifying in its clarity. They said I was a miracle, that I didn't belong to anyone anymore, that bloodlines were political fiction. One man, he wore red ties. He came in sometimes, never spoke, just stared. They said he was my father, but not in the way fathers are supposed to be. They said I was made, not born. One night I heard them say, if she speaks, we're all undone. So I stopped speaking. Until now, the room didn't breathe. Not when she said red ties. Not when she said made. Not even when she said father. Jasmine stepped forward. That girl is alive. Her DNA matches the file. Her testimony is real. Her pain is traceable. And her name is Marin Elise Connors. She laid the bracelet on the table. Then the photo. Then the Department of Health verification letter confirming her identity, issued just 24 hours earlier. She was buried in paper, in payments, in shame. A pause. She is no longer buried. And in that moment, the chamber no longer saw Jasmine as just a congresswoman. They saw her as what she truly was, a resurrection. The room did not erupt. It sank into silence so heavy, so solemn, it felt like morning had entered the building. Senators leaned forward but didn't speak. Staffers stopped typing. One aide covered her mouth. Even Trump, flanked by his team of suited silence, didn't move. His face was pale, not from guilt, but from calculation. This wasn't damage control anymore. It was collapse mitigation. The chair glanced at her colleagues, then cleared her throat and said what no one dared believe would come next. We now move to a vote. The room stiffened. This committee will determine whether to advance a formal recommendation for a full criminal investigation into the actions and affiliations of former President Donald J. Trump and associated entities in relation to Project Stormglass, the unlawful detainment of protected minors, and obstruction of biological intelligence oversight. She paused, then turned to her left. We begin with Senator Hayworth. Hayworth shifted uncomfortably. Old money, old name. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for the mic. I abstain. The chair frowned. Abstention is not permitted in this session, Senator. A long pause, then Hayworth cleared his throat again. Then, no. I vote no. There was an audible inhale from the gallery. 1. The vote moved clockwise. Senator Byrne, a woman known for standing on the fence so long she could sell real estate on it. She looked directly at Jasmine. I vote yes. 1-1. Then came Patel. Yes. Then Ramirez. Yes. Then something happened. A flash of movement in the upper gallery, barely noticeable. But Jasmine caught it. A staffer in the far left corner adjusting his earpiece, subtly tapping his tablet screen twice. A signal. Then the aide behind Senator McClellan leaned in and whispered something, too soft to catch. But Jasmine saw the color drain from McClellan's face. He sat rigid, his jaw clenched, then looked down at a sheet of paper folded neatly on his desk. His vote was next. The chair called his name. McClellan leaned into the mic, his voice brittle. No. 2-3. Jasmine's eyes narrowed. McClellan never voted no, not without checking with 3 ethics councils and a poll from his district. Something had shifted. She mouthed to Marcus, who stood just behind the bench. He nodded once, moved silently to intercept the staffer in the gallery. As the vote continued, Jasmine kept her eyes on McClellan. Senator Chen. Yes. Senator Rosen. Yes. Senator Clark. Yes. Senator Dorr. Yes. By now it was 7-2. The win was mathematically in reach. But Jasmine wasn't watching the tally. She was watching the story behind the no. Marcus returned and slid a folded post-it into Jasmine's hand. It was hastily written, scrawled in pen. They threatened to leak 1987. Archive tape. He's wired. Jasmine looked back at McClellan, who was now breathing shallow, refusing to meet her eyes. They'd gotten to him. She could guess what the threat was. Probably an old scandal. A vote. A deal. Something politically fatal from a time when cameras weren't everywhere, but secrets were just as sharp. He was wired right now, an earpiece buried beneath hair carefully brushed forward. Someone was feeding him instructions. Still, the vote moved on. Senator Aguilar? Yes. Senator Hastings? Yes. It was now 10-2. The chair paused. 2 votes remained. Senator Wu, fiercely independent, reputation of a hawk and a spine of steel. I vote yes, she said firmly. Then came the chair herself. Everyone leaned in. She straightened her posture, removed her glasses, and stared straight ahead. For every girl who was told her pain wasn't credible, she said, voice tight, I vote yes. Final tally, 13-2. The chamber didn't erupt in cheers. It didn't need to. The silence trembled. Because silence in that moment didn't mean complicity. It meant awe. The chair spoke again. This committee now refers its findings and all evidence into public record and formally requests the Department of Justice open a federal criminal investigation under emergency authority. Gavels didn't slam. They whispered. Just once. But the sound echoed across the nation. Trump didn't speak. He didn't shout. He didn't storm out. He just sat there, like a man watching a skyscraper fall in slow motion. And Jasmine? She stayed silent, standing straight, letting the weight of the moment settle in the bones of the room. Not smiling, not crying, just standing, like stone planted in the eye of a storm. Because she hadn't come to destroy a man. She had come to restore a name. And now the world would never again forget Marin Elise Connors. But remembrance was only the beginning. It was 10:31 p.m. Eastern Time when it began, during a syndicated late-night talk show on NBC. The host was mid-sentence, cracking a toothless joke about government conspiracies, when the feed glitched. Just a flicker. Barely half a second, then again. This time the studio lights dimmed, and the screen turned black. Viewers blinked, then a symbol appeared. 17. The same one Jasmine had seen etched onto the hard drive in the oversight chamber. This time it wasn't hiding. Then the video began. No introduction, no narration, just raw, uncut footage, grainy but clear. Donald J. Trump seated at a mahogany desk, signing a document. The angle was perfect. Over the shoulder, time-stamped March 19, 2001. The paper bore the heading, MJL Custodial Transfer Contract, and beneath the line labeled amount, $4,200,000 USD wired from a private offshore account traced back to Baronium Holdings. The note on the bottom, handwritten in red ink, read, Custody Acquisition MMJL. The camera zoomed slowly on the signature, Donald J. Trump. The feed didn't stop there. It cut to surveillance stills, black and white photos from 2001, of a girl no older than 13 seated in a windowless medical bay. Her wrists bore restraints. A clipboard on the table beside her read, Subject 792, active, viable, accelerated response confirmed. Then came audio. Begin full tissue mapping. Will log the regenerative anomalies at 0600. Father's clearance has been confirmed. Proceed without sedation. No names were mentioned, but America had already connected the dots. By 10:42 p.m., the hijack had spread. Every major broadcast network was mirroring the same signal. Local stations, streaming platforms. Even Times Square's massive LED billboards flickered, then lit up with the video. For once, it wasn't an ad. It was a reckoning. In kitchens and gas stations and late-night cabs, Americans leaned forward, gripped by something deeper than curiosity. It wasn't just outrage now, it was recognition, a knowing in their bones that they had been watching something for 20 years and hadn't seen it until this moment. In Phoenix, an EMT pulled over on the side of the road, sobbing, whispering, she was just a kid. In Kansas City, a retired nurse clutched a crucifix, mouthing, I saw her. In 04, I thought. In Miami, a woman turned to her daughter and said, her name is Marin, that's her name. Don't let anyone take it again. And in D.C., in the quiet office of a congresswoman who had traded comfort for clarity, Jasmine CROCKETT watched the country wake up. Not by choice, but by force. She hadn't leaked the file. She hadn't authorized the hijack. But someone, somewhere in the shadow chain, had decided the world deserved to see what silence had protected. It lasted 12 minutes. 12 unbroken, uninterrupted minutes of evidence that couldn't be dismissed, spun, or buried beneath legal jargon. At 10:51 p.m., the screen went black. Then a single line appeared. They called her a project, but she remembered her mother. Then darkness. The broadcast cut back to regular programming. But no one was laughing anymore. By 11:03, hashtags flooded social media. Custody acquisition, Chaucer's Subject 792, Chaucer, Marin Lives, Trump Files, Pasha, Do Not Forget. Her name Jasmine's phone buzzed with over 200 missed calls. The DOJ, foreign embassies, journalists, families of other missing girls. But she didn't answer any of them. She was watching something else. Her mother asleep on the hospital bed, the live camera feed from the guarded room showing peaceful, unshaken slumber. The agent outside her door gave a small nod when he noticed Jasmine watching. Safe, for now. At 11:22 p.m., her encrypted line lit up with a single message. From unknown custody, Ifibur mail, Dio. Subject phase 3. Confirmed. The custodian has lost the room. Body. You lit the fuse. Tomorrow is combustion. Watch the Senate floor. Jasmine stared at it, then powered down the screen. Not out of fear, but preparation. Because the moment had finally arrived. They tried to bury Moran with money, ink, shadows, and silence. But now the world had seen her face, and no empire survives the sound of a child finally being heard. 3 days later, the world slowed down, not with chaos, but with clarity. There was no breaking news banner, no press conference, no last-minute statement from the Trump legal team. No denial, because by then, there was nothing left to deny. Marin Elise Connors had been heard, and so, on a quiet Friday morning, under an overcast sky, Jasmine CROCKETT stood beneath a willow tree in Maryland's oldest cemetery, the kind where the grass grows uneven and the stones lean like tired bones. She wore black, but not to mourn. She stood before a headstone, freshly carved, the granite still dusted with flecks of white from the mason's blade. It read, Maureen Elise Connors, 1987-2000, or was she? Just beneath it, etched in smaller script, she remembered her mother. It wasn't a grave in the traditional sense. There was no body inside, no casket beneath the earth. The real Moran, now 27 and rebuilding her identity cell by cell, had chosen not to be buried. But she'd asked for something to be left behind, a marker, to acknowledge the part of her that never left the lab, the part that was buried alive in silence. So Jasmine made sure the world would have a place to come and look that silence in the eye. At first it was only her. Then came a nurse from Texas who remembered a missing girl with rapid healing in '02. Then a man from Ohio who said he worked on the Stormglass network but never understood what he was building. Then children, mothers, veterans, silent men in suits who never gave their names. By noon, over 300 people had gathered. By sundown, over 3,000. They came not with signs, not with chants, but with flowers, handwritten notes, and paper slips taped to the headstone. On each, 3 words were scrawled like a prayer. I see her. I see her now. Forgive us. Some cried. Some stared in silence. Some just stood, stone-faced, fists clenched, as if standing before a tomb finally gave them permission to believe it had all really happened. Jasmine remained near the edge of the crowd, letting the moment belong to everyone. Reporters tried to approach. She waved them off. One young boy, no older than 12, stood beside her with his grandmother. He looked up and asked, "Is she going to be okay now?" Jasmine knelt and met his eyes. She already is. Later that night, as the wind picked up and the first storm of the season rolled in, Jasmine returned one last time alone. The crowd had thinned, but candles still burned low at the base of the headstone. Rain threatened, but hadn't yet touched the marble. She crouched beside it and placed a folded piece of paper into the grass. Inside, Marin's original letter, the one that had begun it all. If anyone reads this, please tell my mom it was never her fault. She pressed it into the earth like a vow. Then she rose, facing the empty cemetery and the dark horizon beyond it. No security, no speeches, just truth. And then finally her voice, low, certain, almost a whisper. Truth doesn't fear the grave. But power fears the truth. She turned and walked away. The wind picked up behind her, rustling the trees like applause from ghosts. And beneath the soil, no body, no blood, but something just as powerful. Memory, unforgotten. What we bury doesn't always stay dead. Sometimes it grows in silence, waiting for someone brave enough to dig with bare hands and bleeding heart. Marin's story reminds us, justice is not about vengeance, but remembrance, that a name whispered with love is louder than power screamed in fear, and that truth, no matter how long denied, is never lost. It is merely waiting for someone to believe it still matters. Be the one who listens. Be the one who speaks when silence becomes cruelty. Because history doesn't change when power falls. It changes when someone chooses to remember. If this story made you feel something, don't just scroll. Sit with it, share it, speak it aloud. Send it to someone who still believes that silence isn't neutral. It's dangerous. Subscribe to Harrison Stories, where buried names are spoken and erased lives are remembered. Hit the bell, because the next story won't be comfortable. It'll be real even if it's fiction. And it might just change the way you see power, memory, and what we call justice. This was a dramatized story, crafted from shadows of truth and echoes of forgotten voices. Any resemblance to real people or events is either coincidence or commentary. Thank you for watching. Justice isn't quiet, and here, we don't let it be. This is Harrison Stories.